You'll remember when he said I was born in Kenya, always pushing his racist agenda, fanning the flames of hate. His poles are sinking, meanwhile his tiny hands keep shrinking. He's a mild juvenile offender, but soon we will celebrate.
Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution. Join me, Naima Latif, every morning, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, as we bring you stimulating discussions about the issues affecting our lives. If you're listening online at www.blogtalkradio.com/the-female-solution, press the blue button that says follow and get our daily topics every morning directly to your email and your smartphone. Hi, I'm Naima Latif, Executive Producer of the Female Solution Radio Show. We invite you to call in 515-605-9325 and participate in this daily think tank as we examine the challenges we face and develop solutions that restore peace and harmony. We are global transformers, changing the world from the way it is to the way it should be. We are one. Wherever we live on this earth, we are one human family. On behalf of our team of radio hosts, I'd like to extend a greeting to all the members of our family, whenever and wherever you may be listening around the world. To our family in China, Ni Hao. In India, Namaste. In Japan, Konnichiwa. In Korea, Annyeonghaseyo. In Russia, Здравствуйте. In Germany, Guten Tag. In Poland, Dzień dobry. In France, Bonjour. In Spain, Hola. In Italy, Ciao. In Egypt, Ahlan wa sahlan. In Ghana, Akwaba. In Nigeria, Peleo. In South Africa, Sawubona. In Senegal, Nangadef. In Kenya, Jambo. In Israel, Shalom. In Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia, Assalamu alaikum. Greetings, and may peace be upon you all.
Is Monday morning a struggle to get out of bed into the swing of things? Well, don't worry, you are not alone. Join us for thought-provoking, stimulating, and mindful conversations on higher learning with Zelda Speaks for your Monday morning mindfulness session on Blog Talk Radio, The Female Solution, Mondays, 7:30 until 9 a.m. Be sure and send your ideas, thoughts, comments, and suggestions. Experience mindfulness moments with the mindfulness/stress relief coach, Zelda Speaks. And thanks for sharing the mindfulness moment tip of the day. Stay on purpose, stay empowered, and stay tuned to your next session of mindfulness on higher learning with Zelda Speaks. Make it a mindful day. And thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Julie Myrista. I'm with the American Heart Association, and we have been up to our ears in sweetened beverage tax, so I so much appreciated the 5-minute meditation today that allowed me to get back to my center, take a few deep breaths, and really focus on what's important.
Shalom and good God morning. And thank you for joining me today on blogtalkradio.com, The Female Solution. It's your Monday morning mindfulness with Zelda Speaks. Mindfulness stress release coach. I'm just here to make your day better.
In regards to the meditation that we did after the Philanthropy Club meeting, it was great because it gave me such a feeling of relief, and the softness of Zelda's voice made me slow down and take pace at what I was doing. Kind of made me concentrate on my breathing. So it was just such an asset to have that portion of our meeting. I don't think you get that quite at every meeting. It was just such an asset.
I have advantages in my work. I'm here talking to you. There are all sorts of ways in which I have benefits that come with racial privilege that I think are part of the structure that made slavery possible to begin with. So if we are only focusing on the institution of slavery, then we're asking, I think, too narrow of a question. Instead, I think slavery becomes one of the most brutal forms of white supremacy, but white supremacy is something that has structured U.S. society from the very beginning. That said, our economy, today's economy, the U.S. economy was built on the slave trade. Right? So to the extent that you live a comfortable life today and that many of us are living comfortable lives is in part because of that history. So while you may not, your family or my family may not have actually enslaved anyone, we can't distance ourselves from the problem of white supremacy and the horror of slavery as part of our national inheritance and part of the structure of the economy and our culture. You know, I thought Ta-Nehisi Coates had a great answer to Mitch McConnell. When Mitch McConnell said, it's in the past, right? Like, let's get over it. Well, you can't pick and choose which parts of our history we want to love and celebrate. You know, we celebrate July 4th every July, or the independence of the United States. We celebrate all sorts of things that we want to embrace, but there's some ugly things too that we have to see as part of who we are and part of the DNA of the United States, and slavery is one of them.
It is wonderful to see that you have gone that far, and then that's wonderful to see. We also know that education is at the base of removal of slavery, whether mentally or physically. What do you think is the responsibility of the government and higher institution to actually allow African American and people of color to get education at a price that's affordable to them? Because a lot of students are dropping out because they are student loans and then they're completely blocked in life.
Yeah.
What is the situation that could be helped there?
Excellent question, and I think there are many people who are talking about rendering our educational system more just and repairing the intergenerational underinvestment in education in Black and brown communities as part of what reparations should include. One of the things I look at in the last chapter of the book is the intergenerational or over time benefit of investing in land as opposed to investing in education. And it turns out that there's a greater benefit financially and in terms of other forms of human thriving with actually owning property than in like subsidizing education for particular individuals of color, let's say. That isn't to say that we shouldn't improve education in this country and make it, repair the case that people get educated in different ways depending on their race and get different educations because of that. And there are really there's wonderful thinking going on about perhaps this trust that I'm suggesting that we create, having a block grant to historically Black colleges and universities, right? Reinvest in Black educational institutions, certainly, but also even in elementary and secondary school, improving education across the country. So I think yes, and it's vitally important.
Thank you so much for your talk.
Raise your, wait, oh, there you are, thank you.
Anyway, yeah, thank you, this is so informative. One of the things I'm wondering is, you gave such a beautiful representation of someone after, well, during the period of Reconstruction, offering land, like recognizing that you can be freed but not free, and the land was the place to begin. And I'm wondering, in your recommendations, it seems like, again, sounds great, have trust, have land, have communities, allow people to create those communities in ways that reflect what they value. But how then do we address the sort of broader framework of the ways in which people and systems may not recognize, like how do you break down the power structures in a sense that allowed for the land to be retaken? So even if we create trusts now, like how do you address the sort of the same thing happening again?
Yeah. So another section in the book talks about what we did with Native American people in this country. So at the very time that black people were saying, freed people said, we want land, that's what will set us free, African Americans were being forced to own land in fee simple, which is a legal term of, straight out good title. Native American people didn't believe in owning land that way, but they were causing all sorts of mischief in the West as we were trying to build railroads. They were getting in the way and roaming around and not staying put. And so the idea that we would civilize, as the term at the time was, Native people by binding them to the land and making them own a homestead. What they wanted was contract. What they wanted were treaties. What black people wanted at the exact same time, and you can see the same day in Congress, the same people talking about this, what black people wanted was land, and what they got was contract. They got labor contracts, right? So these different means of these legal, I love teaching this stuff to law students because they think, this stuff's all boring in the first year, but it gets really interesting when you think about it in history. These different legal tools are used with different populations to serve a larger national project. And what happened with Native people, of course, is they were given or forced onto the land and then swindled out of that land later. So I don't have any naive view that if we had gone with this original plan, that there wouldn't be horrible people who would trick people out of their land, or as we know, for those formerly enslaved people who did get land, and there were many. There should have been many, many more. Though many of those black communities don't exist anymore because of the Klan, because of racial terror, driving people out of the South. So I don't want to be Pollyannish about what white supremacy can do in divesting people of their freedom. But we could have done better than what we did. Right? And at each critical step, we have to think about how to protect people's freedom rather than how to render it more vulnerable. And unfortunately, in this society, at every step, we have rendered black freedom more vulnerable rather than more durable.
I commend you for your intentions, but I must be critical of your approach to it. Money will not buy freedom. And so what you're doing by your approach to things is perpetuating the idea that there are minorities, and those minorities are described by skin color or origin of birth. To me, what I suggest is that we should focus on eliminating the idea of calling our neighbors by their skin color or from where they came. And that would be a lot more successful in eliminating discrimination, because we'll have no sense that there are minorities.
Well, there are many people, I think, who hold the view that what we should do as a form of reparations is write checks to individual black people. And I have a friend who says, "Where's my Cadillac?" I'm good with that. I'd love a check. But that to me is just giving money, throwing money at the issue, rather than thinking about how to empower communities themselves, how they can empower themselves. You probably have not read the Movement for Black Lives platform that came out 2 summers ago. And in it, I'll just share with you, is this fundamental idea of divesting from certain institutions that have perpetuated the subordinate status of black people in this country, like prisons, and divesting there, investing in community empowerment. And that's part of what I'm trying to think about in this book, is how might we not just write people checks, but think about how to empower, to come back to our word of the day or of the festival, empower black people, not because of their skin, but because of the history, because of the forms of white power that have been exerted against them, white supremacy, through many, many means from the founding of this country, or from 1619 if we want to go back even further. So I'm not focusing only on race or skin color. I'm trying to tell a historical story about power and freedom, and I don't think we're throwing money at freedom. I think I'm trying to offer a much more complicated way to think about what it is to repair that historical intergenerational injury. But thank you for your thoughts. Thank you, that's kind of you.
There's been a global movement of sorts in this regard. In Oxford, there was a debate on reparations to be paid by the British to the colonies, and there was a debate in Oxford 3 years ago where the students voted 2/3 to 1/3 for reparations for the colonies. So this is a global movement. This has happened in Australia too. So my question is, can we not, at this moment where there is a lot of debate about these and there's a lot of energy in this field, to move us not just for reparations here, but reparations everywhere, so we look at these things in a way so they don't happen again. So the question really is not just what we do for now, but how do we do this for perpetual, future, that these things do not happen, whether it's the Aboriginal people or the Maori people in New Zealand or the Native Indians.
Right. Well, every geographic location, state, region of the world has its own horrible historical narrative it should tell about how people have been, whether it's enslaved or otherwise exploited. My worry about having only one conversation, one overarching conversation internationally, is that different things are necessary in different places. So for instance, even just in the United States, for Native people, we should be talking about reparations there as well. Very often I hear slavery referred to as the original sin. Not so much, really. What we did to Native people who lived here when Europeans settled was pretty horrible, and in some ways predates chattel slavery, or the forcible kidnapping and torture of African people in the US and in the Americas. So what reparations would look like for Native people, very different, I think, than what it would look like or should look like for black people in this country. Largely, Native people want sovereignty, right? They want a whole different kind of approach than I think you see coming out of the groups that are working and have been working for many years on reparations domestically. Last quick thing I would just say about the many interesting things you said is, if we grant reparations once and for all, none of this will ever happen again. I'm not sure that if we want to live in a just world, we want to live in a world where we regard each person based on their humanity, rather than based on their race, their religion, whatever the reasons are why we exploit people. Reparations may not be the tool to do that. And I think there's some ways in which, now that reparations is popular, and I have to say I started this book 10 years ago before nobody in a big sense was talking about the issue. Lots of smaller groups were, but we didn't have the same kind of national conversation about it as we are now. So much of what we hear in the reparations conversation today is asking reparations to do too much. Right? We should have a just society, whether or not we have a history of slavery in this country or not. Right? There are all sorts of forms of injustice in the United States, but globally, that don't all have to be tethered to colonialism, to forms of violent conquest, to crusades, to religious wars of various kinds, or to slavery. And so I think at some point, there's only so much weight reparations can bear in curing the world. And so we need to have that larger conversation about what it is to treat each other with dignity. A piece of that is reparations, but I don't think that's the whole story. Thank you for helping me remember where my train of thought was going.
Was unaware of this history of the transition between Lincoln and Johnson and how I'm just wondering if you could explicate the context a little better. Was this a part of a dispute that they had before the transition, where the land was given, and how did it come about that this, the change in administration led to this very deep change in policy?
Well, Lincoln didn't think he would be reelected, and so he brought on a vice presidential candidate who came from the South and who was a slavery sympathizer. Johnson had always supported slavery, and I would commend to you Jill Lepore's piece in the New Yorker last week or whatever it was, where she's talking about the history of impeachment. But she also does a nice backstory of who Andrew Johnson was. And I mean, there were things to impeach him for that were much worse than what we actually impeached him for. So he was always a sympathizer of Southern plantation owners and enslavers. Never signed up for the project of fighting the Civil War to end the institution of slavery. So of course, the first thing he's going to do is help out his buddies in the South through the amnesty oath and by restoring land. So this was not an inconsistency in any way. This was consistent with who he was, and part of why Lincoln chose him on the ticket.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you came to this work 10 years ago? And because I have to say that I have also some issues, quite a few issues about the logic behind the book, not having read the book. But I would like to, sorry. I would like to
My students say that all the time. I really disagree, but I didn't do the reading, but however, here's... No, but tell me your disagreement.
Can I understand more about how you came to the work?
So I have two books. The first book is called Wedlocked, The Perils of Marriage Equality. And that's where my research started, was as we were moving towards marriage equality for same-sex couples in this country, I was thinking, what if we went back and looked at what newly freed people experienced when they could marry for the first time? Might there be some lessons for today's same-sex marriage movement of what it means to be a freer, a civil subject through the institution of marriage? Because I've always thought marriage was a kind of odd thing to fight for, to invite the state to regulate your most intimate relationships right after they decriminalized us as felons. I thought, maybe we need a break from the state, not invite the state in, but I had a minority view. So I spent lots of time in archives in the South going through marriage licenses, looking at what happened to African American people who could marry for the first time. And it turns out, be careful what you wish for. In a society that still hates you, marriage becomes the vehicle through which Black people were, or let's say the racism that underwrote slavery could perpetuate itself through legal means. So what many states did is automatically married formerly enslaved people who were living together as spouses from when they were enslaved to after emancipation. So they automatically married them, which was a good thing because you didn't have to pay a marriage fee, and these were very, very poor people. And it also recognized the integrity and dignity of their relationships, their marriages. What it also meant is that many, many Black men were prosecuted for bigamy, fornication, which is sex outside of marriage, and adultery, because they didn't know that there were rules that went along with this institution. So before the end of slavery, we had almost zero prison population. After we ended the institution of slavery, the prisons were instantly populated with Black men who were then leased out through the convict leasing system to do the agricultural work that enslaved people had done before and died at much higher rates doing it, because you will work a leased asset to death. You wouldn't do that with something you owned. So marriage played a big role, marriage laws, in populating prisons with black men. That book is for sale outside too, if you want that. I mean, that's just one of the stories. So, and I take this all very seriously, is how, what it meant as I started. What does it mean to be freed? And what must that have been like? And so in reading those records around the marriage, the institution of marriage, I came across all these other records around these experiments in freedom that I thought, well, here's another book of reparations. So that's how I got there.
Okay. I run a project called The History Makers, and we document African American lives and have interviewed 3,300 people over a 19-year period. The thing that I would say is that some of the logic, I don't think it's informed from a black perspective. And for that, I think there's a danger in some of the things that I've heard today, but I just needed to say that. I'd like to have a longer discussion with you.
Well, I thank you, because I don't profess to have this all figured out. I feel pretty good about the history, but I'm imagining it's the recommendations at the end, perhaps, that you are taking issue with. Okay, then let's talk. I am always learning. And I look forward to learning from you. Yeah.
Donna Woods, I really enjoyed your talk. I enjoyed the detail that you provided me with across this period. I knew some of the facts, but I didn't understand the dynamics behind it. One of the things I just thought I would share to your last comment about how these structures, like what is free? So I worked in mental health in 1980. And in 1979, and for hundreds of years before that, people were in institutions if they were considered crazy. In 1980, people were given a subway token and put out onto the streets. And the same kind of thing what triggered my comment is, same kind of thing, moved right straight from the street into the prisons. And that became the new sort of institution of mental health. So maybe your next project.
Actually, I am working on a history of private prisons, so we'll work together too. Yeah, thank you.